everybody. This is Chris
and Cathy
from Petability Podcast. We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to Petability Podcast through your favorite streaming app. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Petability Podcast and share our content on social media.
You can also support the show by making a donation. Simply go to our website at petabilitypodcast.buzzsprout.com and click on the heart symbol at the top of the page. Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Petability. I'm your host, Cathy Simons.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston. Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives. Hey, Cathy, are you ready for an enriching podcast?
Ooh, Chris, I am. Do tell.
Well, okay, but I think all of our podcasts are quite enriching, but that might be a personal bias. But today, we are going to focus on enrichment as a topic.
I am so excited about this, that this is our whole jam. Enrichment.
Yes. And it covers so many layers of what we do in rehabilitation. And so I am happy we're finally targeting enrichment because, no pun intended, because we do tend to mention it almost every podcast. And today we have the goddess of enrichment with us. Her name is Amanda Shyne.
So exciting.
I know. So in her online bio, Amanda states, quote, "I love animals so much that I made it my PhD and my career." Now, to me, that's enough said. I don't even think we need to go on, right? That speaks for itself, but I will. So Amanda pursued a graduate degree in animal behavior at Northeastern University in Boston. Amanda's PhD dissertation examined the effects of environmental enrichment on zoo animal welfare. And the rumor is she has some great zoo stories that I'm sure we'd love to hear today, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear those.
I know. So I met Amanda originally when she was teaching a dog agility seminar. Amanda is the founder of Data-Driven Agility, and due to her training as a researcher, her agility school takes a scientific approach to dog training. Amanda is always trying to find new ways to enrich the everyday lives of dogs, train new skills, and build our relationship with our dogs.
Fantastic.
Yes. So her home is in Vermont, and I happen to know that not only does she have an entire pack of dogs of all shapes and sizes, but also a cat, 2 miniature horses, and several rabbits. I actually think that at the time I took that agility seminar, she just acquired her second miniature horse, and I got to see pictures and video. It was delightful. So I'm sure she has all kinds of enriching experiences that she's providing for her menagerie, and also her little human that she lives with, Theo.
Yes, human children need enrichment too.
I just didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
That's what I heard. That's what I hear. I don't.
So, Cathy, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Amanda Shyne.
Welcome, Amanda.
As a segue, Amanda, can you tell us a bit about what your dissertation involved? I know it was an agility colleague of mine that shared your dissertation with me online, and I didn't even know that you had this life before agility. When I read the paper, I was just fascinated, and I probably butchered what your outcome was, but I know I've shared it with many a pet client in the rehab world over time to try to get them to do more enriching activities with their pets.
Yeah. So, I've always been, like I said, interested in animal behavior, and I initially thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I worked for a vet for some time, and I realized that really what I was interested in was the behavior of animals, not so much their their physical well-being, and I cared more about their behavioral well-being. And so at the zoo, pets, as a general rule, certainly compared to zoo animals, tend to have a lot more. Their life is just more enriching. There's more people, there's more things going on, there's toys, they're interacting. Oftentimes, a lot of pets get to go places, but zoo animals are in kind of the same exhibit day in and day out. And a lot of our zoo animals have engage in behavior that is indicative of poor welfare. So they'll pace, they'll do other sorts of stereotypes. And I was really interested in coming up with different ways to provide them with enrichment so that they could engage in behaviors that gave them some agency and let them kind of have some control over their environment.
So wasn't it some sort of ungulate animal? I think they were given food in a dish, traditional feeding, and then also food that they had to work for. And hands down, these animals chose the food that they had to work for.
There have been so many studies that have shown that. Monkey, just across the board, with the exact same type of food. If they have open food in a bowl, these animals will generally work for food that they would not eat on their own. And in fact, my little mini poodle Giggle will do the exact same thing. If I try to give her kibble in a bowl, she will not eat it. But if I ask her to sit and I click and I give it to her, she'll eat it as a reward. And she's the only one of mine who's like that. But a lot of the zoo animals will do that. I think agency is really important for the well-being of kind of all of us. And so some of the different studies that we did, there was one, I was working with ocelots that are a type of fishing cat at the zoo. And cats kind of traditionally they're not great zoo animals. They tend to have a lot of stereotypes and stuff. And so I used to go to this fishing store and I'd get 20 fish and would stock the little pond that was in the ocelot's enclosure, and those animals would come alive, and they they would just fish and be hunting all day and really interacting with their environment.
Amanda, we've talked and said the word enrichment a couple of times. I'm wondering if you could give our audience the technical definition of enrichment.
It's really anything where it is intended to enhance the quality or value of something, right? So I think of something as enriching if an animal has to work for the food rather than just gets free food. Right. In general, we were really focused on trying to provide environmental enrichment that was specific to the species of animals, so that, the different types of fishing cats could actually fish for fish. And, African wild dogs, we weren't going to give them live prey, but we still were trying to encourage them to search for and look for food and investigate and engage in their normal
behavior, right? Yeah.
Right.
I just wanted to, first of all, I'm always interested in the emotional lives of animals. I think I probably bring it up every single time Chris and I have a podcast. And when I think about enrichment, it makes me think of how enrichment is intertwined with any animal's quality of life. And so if you think about our pets and their quality of life, and just to define quality of life, Dr. Frank McMillan, the author of Mental Health and Wellbeing in Animals, describes it as a balance between pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Just like us, our dogs or pets are going to experience some pleasant things. And they're going to experience some unpleasant things, right? And so when I think about, there's all these factors in quality of life. And as a veterinary technician, the first things I always think of is, does a pet have pain? Are we able to control this pain? Are they eating enough? Are they drinking enough? Do they have mobility, or do they need to be helped with their mobility? And also the final one is joy. Are our pets able to experience something that brings them joy? And I think that's where the environmental enrichment piece really comes in, and engaging them in these normal behaviors. And so dogs or cats or pets that are limited in activity or new experiences might very well, experience things like depression, isolation, boredom, helplessness. So it all just sort of intertwines with that quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the freedom to express normal behavior is kind of the thing that I was always focused on.
Right.
There are some behaviors that you can look at and that the animal is having a positive experience, or at least you could say it looks like something, or it looks like, it feels like something like we would say as joy, or, it's an emotion similar to a human feeling proud, or similar to a human being excited. And I really want to provide possibilities for my dogs to have those emotions and to feel like they're in control of different aspects of their lives. And one of my big things is everybody has to work for food, and in my house. So, they either have to forage for food and in the yard, or they eat out of food toys. My miniature horses have all sorts of food toys. In the summer, I don't tend to worry about them as much because they have fields where they get all their food, and it's kind of similar to, them in a more natural environment. But I really try, and the same with my rabbits. They live in big enclosures, so they just eat the grass and stuff.
And you know what, Amanda? Yeah. It feels good to me too to see them. It feels good for me too to see my dog succeed, to see him succeed or accomplish or problem solve, or what looks like he's proud of himself. Like nothing makes me happier to be like, dude, you really are good at everything. That's it's funny when I've had this experience several times with pet dogs as opposed to agility dogs, because I think agility dogs already kind of know the behavior so much that I don't see it as much. But in some cases where I've had somebody bring a pet dog, over to my house or whatever, and they try to get the dog to go through the tunnel. And then at some point, the dog goes through the tunnel. And on several occasions, the dogs have just been so proud of themselves. They're racing around, and oh my gosh, did you see me? And I went in this side and I came out the other side.
And it's and I don't know exactly what the feelings are, but they certainly look very similar to what a person does when they're feeling proud. And, in that situation, that would make sense. And, I think that's one of my favorite things to see is a dog feeling really proud of themselves.
Amanda, earlier you said that you would go get bait fish for the fishing cats at the zoo and put them in their pond. For our listeners out there, the average pet owners, I don't think this has to be rocket science, right? It just needs to kind of make sense. So as long as it isn't causing our pets fear or physical harm, I think it's a good idea just to, present things and experiences that are novel, that stimulate their senses, that speaks to what the animal would do in their natural environment. So yeah, just being creative out there and trying different things.
Well, so I don't know whether it was during the pandemic. So I'm not sure if it was last summer or the summer before, but I went to a goat farm, which was kind of random. I was just meeting a friend there and so we were the person was showing us around and it was so cool and everything. And when we were leaving, I said, can I just take a little bit of their poop in a bag and bring it home, which, I don't think that the person had ever heard that before because she was quite terrified.
I bet not. Yeah.
But, when I got home, I just kind of sprinkled it over in the corner of my yard and just thought that everybody would enjoy having a new smell or something. And I don't know that they did, but I want to give them as many experiences as they can have. I will mention though, so one of the things with my research with the zoo animals, I did something called a meta-analysis where you ask a very small question, and you get everything that's ever been written about that question. And the question I asked was, does environmental enrichment improve welfare? And so I had hundreds of studies in this. And what did come out was that enrichment that used food was absolutely the most effective. So animals having to work for food. So I was really hopeful that some of the scent studies would have a big impact on the animals' welfare, but it was, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, but the food enrichment was certainly the one type of enrichment that was the most powerful in reducing stereotypes and improving overall welfare.
You mentioned stereotypes a couple of times, and I'm not sure I know what that means. Can you explain what a stereotype is?
So a stereotype is something that, a lot of people think about like a polar bear pacing back and forth. A lot of animals will roll their heads. Sometimes different primates will pick their hair. And you can see it in our pets too. I mean, there are horses who will do this head roll when they're in their stall for too long. Anything that's really repetitive, it's an indicator of poor welfare.
So are they trying to provide self-stimulation?
I think it's more self-soothing. And one of the there was a research study, and I don't have it in front of me, but that was looking at, it's an indicator of poor welfare. And yet, if you look at animals who engage in those stereotypes versus animals that are in the same environments that don't, the animals that engage in those stereotypes often have better cortisone levels and stuff, which is an indicator of welfare too. So it does seem to provide something that they need, but it does indicate that the environment is lacking something.
Yeah. Amanda, for a long time, for the last 30 years, I've been working with and for an avian veterinarian. And I would say the most common thing we see in avian medicine is feather plucking from birds who are stressed because we can't really duplicate their environment very well. And so a lot of the smaller birds seem to do okay in clutches with like budgies and cockatiels, but some of these bigger birds that we have, Amazons, African grays, these birds that have an extremely high level of intelligence are screaming and feather picking. And I noticed that their lives are also, a fair amount shorter than the same bird that would maybe, live, in the wild, barring, of course, it doesn't get eaten by anything. But, as far as their environment and eating and stuff like that. And I think that that's an area, for us as veterinary professionals to, think about everybody, not just your, like you said before, not just your dog, but your cat, your bird, your rabbit. Maybe people don't think about environmental enrichment for rabbits, but they need it. We talked to a woman a couple of months ago who has a tortoise, and she takes her tortoise for walks. Like her tortoise has everything. And genuinely, I would see when I look at her Instagram, because I love to go there, her tortoise seems happy. She goes out. She's got her head out. People are patting her. And she goes for a walk down the park. So we really need to think about across the board for any living creature. What can we do to enhance their lives like that? And So I'm wondering too, like, it sounds like enrichment doesn't necessarily have to be problem solving. Maybe it's just introducing a novel object or a novel activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be problem solving. Would that be true?
No, yeah, I don't think I don't think that there's much problem solving going. So my rabbits live in really large outdoor areas where they just eat the grass all summer. Right. And I don't think that there's much problem solving going on there. I think they're just, eating. Exactly. But they're doing it themselves. They're choosing when they're, having to move around to get it and stuff. And I think that that's an enriching environment. Same with the horses in the summer, they're eating in a natural way.
And it gives them choices. They can move over here, exactly. They can move over there. Yeah, they could bask in the sun.
Of grass. There's different, the horses, there are some spots in the fields and with the rabbits as well. Yeah. There's some grass that looks so perfect to me. Like if I was going out to pick the rabbits some grass and I was somewhere, I would totally pick it because it's lush and green. And yet they don't like it that much.
They're like, no.
They have an aspect of choice. Whereas, in the winter, everything gets eaten right down and they're kind of stuck with the hay and the grain that I provide. And I tried to, again, I put it in different balls and stuff. So they have to move the ball around to get it. But there's less choice. I think it's just very important that animals work for food.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. And I think that's hard to make that a part of everyday life.
Right.
So, yep.
Otison has a whole bunch of great interactive toys and puzzles that you can put food in. You have to move the flap, move this, pick this up, turn that to get your food. And one of the things my dog has that he loves, one of his favorite things is a snuffle ball. I have to hide it. I have to hide the snuffle ball because if he sees it, but it's so much, he's engaging his senses, his sense of smell. He's mobile and moving around, which Chris and I love because we love to talk about rehab and movement. And it breaks up his boredom. It breaks up any part of his day. Like it's freezing here today. We're going to get out the snuffle ball and then he's going to love it.
One of the things that I just do when I have, I have multiple dogs, so I don't tend to do it with everybody loose, but if it's a really cold day, I'll, have one dog in the living room with me at a time, and I'll just throw a handful of food behind the chair, behind the couch, all around. And
fun,
and that's just something that gives them, something to do and something to look for and
foraging, natural behavior.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Amanda, if somebody threw a bunch of chocolate chip cookies around my house, I swear to you, I would spend the whole day foraging for those. But I do the same thing.
I have a funny, I have done some online classes with enrichment for pet dogs because I teach a lot of agility online. And so I've taught a few environmental enrichment for dogs online. And there was this one and kind of the main one that I tell everybody is, and I have all these videos of my dogs foraging outside. And one of the great things is when you do a good forage, there's no sort of people always are like, well, why aren't they fighting? And they're not fighting because it's one piece of kibble. And by the time they eat it, it's gone and there's nothing to kind of guard, right? So anyway, so this one girl was foraged her dogs and her boyfriend or husband did not like it. He thought that it was very mean and they should just get right. And so she sent in this video of me and the guy's out there on his knees picking up pieces of kibble to give his dog. So, I don't know. I guess I enriched his day.
Yeah, there's his enrichment. There's his enrichment, Amanda. He went out there and picked up that.
That's right.
I imagine that there might be some misconception that you think that it might not be nice or cruel to make your dog work for something. But I don't. I think you're right. I think it's all part of the enriching process. I think that they enjoy working for the thing. And I think that it's also very bonding for you and your dog to train, right?
Yeah. Well, I would go a step further than that and say it's actually a need. I think it's a behavioral need. And when we talk a lot in the zoo research about behavioral needs, and one thing that's hard for people to understand is, they don't really think of behavior as a need. But there are things that you need to do. Yeah. And if you don't do them, your welfare is poor. And I think searching for and having some agency and some, over, access to food, which is the most kind of basic thing, is a need. It's not just, something fun for us to do with our dogs. I think they actually have a need to do it. Yeah.
Amanda, I have to just brag about how smart my dog is. Taught him, and I was so proud of myself.
Yep.
We got him a mat, and we said, you're going to eat all your meals here on the mat, and all you have to do when the meals are ready is go to your mat, be quiet, no barking, wait,
yep.
and wait, and keep your butt on the mat, and then I'll put the food down, and you've earned it by sitting and staying and being quiet. Yep. And he eats at 3:00, and at 2:30, the little stinker gets the mat, Amanda, and brings it to where he gets.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so cute.
Sat on it and said, here it is. I'm sitting and being quiet.
Cathy, I'd like to take a small break here to introduce our brand new sponsor, adogsbestlifebox.com. What better time to launch this sponsor than during an enrichment podcast, because this is a subscription enrichment box that you can order online, and it addresses so many things that are going to enhance your life with your dog. So again, it's called adogsbestlifebox.com.
Chris, I am so excited and so happy to be partnering with A Dog's Best Life box. This is what we are all about. Enrichment, enrichment, enrichment. Now, each box is going to come with an enrichment toy, chew toy, some high value training treats, recipes, and my favorite part, an activities challenge card. So you and your dog can learn something new together.
They have one-time, monthly, or quarterly seasonal subscriptions. The price is right. You cannot get this type of quality product if you were to buy it individually for this package price. And just for our listeners, a special gift that is a fantastic treat pouch that includes, it has a built-in squeaker. I've never seen this out there. I mean, this company really strives to have products that you can't typically get at your local pet store or the big box store.
Yes. And when you do go to adogsbestlifebox.com, use the promo code PETPOD22. That's PETPOD 22, capital letters, and receive 10% off on your order.
Cathy, you are always concerned, as am I, about the emotional lives of our pets. And in this box, you will have tools to address their emotional lives and ensure their joy. So again, go to adogsbestlifebox.com and put in PetPod22 to get both 10% off and your special gift through the Petability podcast. So, Amanda, you have mentioned and used this word agency and choice a couple of times. And in preparing for this talk today, our little chat, I actually looked up, some kind of technical stuff in terms of definitions and things online. And that's one of the things that they talk about. So I'm just going to read this and see if you have any comments. So,
perfect.
Environmental or behavioral enrichment is the process of manipulating an animal's environment to increase physical activity and normal species typical behavior that satisfies the animal's physical and psychological needs. It reduces stress and therefore promotes overall health by increasing an animal's perception of control over their environment and by occupying their time.
Yeah.
And they say that the techniques utilized generally fall into 5 categories. And the first is food-based enrichment, which we've talked about. Yep. Sensory enrichment, which we haven't touched on a whole lot, but let's review for our audience what the 5 senses are. So sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. Novel objects would be the third one in the list. Social enrichment and positive training.
Mm-hmm.
So in that vein, I've been thinking of this the whole time. I recently was sent a little video on YouTube of a fish in Israel that was put into a glass tank on the floor. And there's all kinds of sensors and things. And the researchers are, kind of looking from above and behind a wall. And this fish is in this tank in the middle of this empty space. And as the fish swims, it is controlling the directionality of the tank. The researchers were saying it did not take long. It looks like a typical goldfish, some sort of goldfish.
Yep.
For this goldfish to determine that it had control over its environment. They could witness that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how amazing is that? That, when we think about, all the things that we can do and how enriching, like if we get these mobile fish tanks in our for our pets, they're no longer stuck.
How much more fun that is as a pet owner too, to to see that. That's really cool.
I just thought that was amazing. So, would you say that those things that I touched on as I was reading there, that kind of sums things up in terms of?
Yeah. I mean, I would mention that other than the social, enrichment, which is obviously very, very important, all of those do have aspects of food. So I think of positive reinforcement training, usually we use food for that. So there's still an aspect for working for food. And then with sensory, taste is, really important. I know that they've done a lot of, especially in zoos, they've done a lot of different things with scent, because scent is so important to animals. Food is, luckily, I think it's really easy for pet owners to just control that. And it is so important. And searching and foraging for food is a very calming behavior. Mm-hmm. They're very kind of relaxed and low key, and they'll search for food, and then they'll take a break and sleep for an hour or so, or do whatever, and then go back to it a few hours later. So, I don't know the exact situation, but, I certainly think that some of that food could be foraged.
Sure.
And wouldn't need to be as wet. Yeah.
And you said too earlier that like you'll have one dog at a time in your living room, or you'll have one piece of kibble that they're searching for. So then there's no resource guarding because it's one and done.
No. Oh, I'm glad you said that. No. Oh. So every morning I forage the dogs outside. And I forage all my dogs together other than Joe, who is aggressive. But everybody else goes out together, and it's a real scatter though. Like I don't just throw a pot of food, because there would be a lot of fighting. Right. But I go out and I scatter all the food. And it's so scattered that when a dog finds a piece of kibble, it's gone. So again, there's nothing for them to resource guard. And I have a big yard. When I do it in the house, like in the living room, that's when I'm real careful about only having one dog, because it's a smaller space.
Yep.
There could be some kind of grumpiness going on about food. But outside, where they have a nice big fenced in yard, everybody gets foraged together. And I am very careful about weight. I do my son's lab. She usually is locked up when I do the first scatter, and the border collies kind of get a crack at it for, a while before I let her out, because
she's the cleanup crew.
She is the cleanup crew. Yes. So, and then also I do have, both my mini poodle and one of my border collies always gets a separate food toy in their crate at night, because, they don't work hard enough for the scatter, and they won't have enough to eat, and they get thin. So, I'm very careful about their weight, and I have my hands on them all day anyway, but I do think about their weight probably more than I would have to if I was just doing normal feeding with them.
Right. 'Cause it's a little bit a little bit less predictable. I mean,
Exactly.
Again, if
Exactly.
we're measuring, that quarter cup and putting it in their
Right.
bowl, you know exactly how much they're eating. But,
Right.
and one of the quotes that I always tell my clients is, to put your dog's food in a bowl is actually doing them a disservice. And they always look at me kind of wide-eyed, and then that's when I go into the whole, foraging. I just had a new client last week that her dog is really food motivated.
Yep.
And he's on prednisone, so he's hungry. And so I said he had a little neurological episode and could really benefit from movement. He's 12 years old. He could benefit from, working on his balance and, just all kinds of things. So I said, hey, what about, scattering some treats around your house and having him, forage for them and look for them. And she just looked at me and she said, oh, he won't eat them. And I just thought that was really strange.
So then I think she should cut up some meatballs and make the treats higher value. If they're not willing to work for the kibble or whatever else, then you can, make it a higher value treat or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, I've used it. I generally have border collies that are all crazy. And I had a dog, Dilly, who was terrified of my kitchen floor because it was slippery. Mm-hmm. And so I used to just lock him. He had a room next to the kitchen and then he had the kitchen, and I would scatter the food in the kitchen and then I'd go off to work. This was back when I was a professor, and, and that's how he would, and it was, he had all the time in the world and he could go and he got himself, accustomed to, going in the kitchen that way. The one thing that I will mention about when you, talked about environmental enrichment and you said it reduces stress. I do think there are times when, enriching behaviors or activities increase stress too. And as I forget which one of you said, we can't just have positive experiences in life.
Oh, that was Cathy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Balance between positive and negative.
Exactly. And, I do think it's okay for our animals to go through some stress and to kind of, as I'm trying to teach Theo, like you've got to work through things and you can be frustrated and work through it. And, I have a pretty hard food toy that I just gave to Joe, Joker the other day. And I was working out with the horses and he was working at it. And then he just looked at me and just started barking and stopped doing the toy. And, he was really frustrated. And I don't think his stress was reduced. I think his stress was increased. But then I kind of left him alone with it. And by the time I came out, a few hours later, he had gotten all of the food. And
Yeah, my Julep does the same thing. If I give her a puzzle toy, she'll maybe try it for a very short period of time. And then she backs up and looks at me and barks. Help me, Mom.
Yeah.
So would you say, well, first of all, I just want to enrichment and behavioral enrichment and environmental enrichment. Those are all kind of synonymous terms. Is that true?
Yeah, I generally think of, and I don't know how much of this is true in the field, but I think of environmental enrichment as a little bit more trying to make the enclosure or the, I think of it for zoo animals that you're trying to create an environment so for a fishing cat, for them to have a pond, for them to have access to the different things. Whereas I think of enrichment as maybe, like you said, a Kong with food in it or something. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank goodness. I mean, as a kid, no matter where we went, on vacation or traveled, it's like I wanted to go to the zoo, right? That was just my passion. And I can remember, watching those animals pacing, whether it was the tiger or fairly recently, this was in my adulthood. They had African dogs at the Phoenix Zoo. And my heart just broke because it seemed like a pretty decent enclosure, but the pacing, those stereotypes that you were talking about. But, it's just so wonderful how over the decades,
right,
that so much effort has been put into, changing at least the space, and making it mimic more what those animals are meant to live in. And, I watched like the zoo, on Animal Planet, and I had for my birthday, I went to the Bronx Zoo, and, all of the things, where they hide their food and, have to find it, within things or under things or in back of things. And, so it's come such a long way. And I'm going to, take a leap here, because I think in the beginning, Amanda, you said, it comes more naturally with pets, just living with them, that they get enriching activities more naturally. So it seems like this whole buzzword of enrichment has really been brought forth by appreciating what the captive animals are going through in zoos. And I've also read recently about and we hate to even think about this, but like the laboratory animals, the animals that are in captivity because of science and studies and such.
Well, there's something called the Bramble. There was the Bramble Committee, and they came up with the 5 freedoms, and it came about back in, I think, the 1960s. And it was originally there was a book written talking about animal machines, and there was this outcry from the British people, and they just said, and it was looking at the welfare of farm animals. I'm sorry, I should have started with that. So it was looking at the welfare of farm animals.
Gotcha.
And so they did this whole big committee looking at what was kind of required, and they came up with the 5 freedoms. And so these are the things that zoos and labs really are kind of working for. And I think 4 of them are pretty obvious. So like freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain or injury, and freedom from fear and distress. Those are kind of course, right? Animals should be free of those. But the last one is the freedom to express normal behavior. And that is one of the things that is very hard in a lab environment, and often in zoo environments. And I think that that's what a lot of the people are, who really do care about the animals are trying to give them.
We've talked a lot about, dogs and how you enrich for them. You kind of touched on, that you do, like when the horses, for example, can't be out in the pasture. So what do you do specifically for them? Do you do any like DIY kinds of things to, feed them? And
So for my dogs, everybody has to work for food during the day, and some more than others. Like, I do have those few dogs who, in addition to foraging, also get food puzzles in their crates. Everybody has to take a walk every day. I say every day. When I'm having a trial here or having a seminar here, everybody suffers a little bit. No, we don't get our walks in, but everybody has the chance to explore every single day. And I do multiple walks because I have Joker, who's my lovely dog, who's wonderful, but very, very aggressive. So he can't go out with the other dogs. And so he has an individual walk, but sometimes he goes with the girl dogs because he's good with the girls. But then, everybody else. And luckily I live in a place where I have them off leash, which, is also really nice. And I know not everybody can do that, but, we go on an off leash walk every day. Usually everybody gets 2 walks. And then they work for food. And those are the things that are absolutely constant of every single one of my dogs.
I want to interject here a second, just because one of my clients actually mentioned that she had recently read not to stress out about bringing her dog, in this case, to a different or novel place to walk every day, because the scent profile in her neighborhood, she's in the city, is constantly changing, and it would be anywhere, right?
Right.
So dogs, bring in so much of their world. That's how they see the world, is through smell. And, I'd always told people like, well, walk in a different place, drive them to a park, go in an opposite direction, whatever, because as a person, I was kind of projecting that on the dogs. But when she told me that, I'm like, that was an aha moment, because it's so true. The way the wind is wafting and whatever's in the air, they're getting that as a enrichment activity. And I remember, as a kid, we just let the dogs out in the yard. Sure, that was enriching, but we never took them on walks, ever. Right. And Cathy used this phrase recently, and I love it. She said, the more we know, the more we grow. And I have certainly grown over time. And so, in addition to my dogs going in the yard, they definitely get daily walks. So carry on.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I wish that my dogs, I wish I was more adventurous, but there aren't too many places I'll let everybody off leash. So I am I do tend to take the same walk frequently. And you're right. There are always different places where everybody's over there, and whether a deer was there or something, but you're right. The environment does change. And then a lot of my dogs, there's I do a lot of training. I won't say everybody gets trained every day. In fact, I have my son's lab almost never gets trained. I never train her. But she gets different attention from him, but most of my dogs will get some aspect of training every day. All my young ones do. And those are kind of the three things that I think of as the core, and then of kind of every day, day in and day out. And then whenever, as I said about the goat farm, then I'm always kind of on the lookout for something new and doing something different, and, trying a new activity. And so some of my, I have Joker is a little bit older, and, his agility career is, winding down. And so I'm having fun doing different tricks and different Frisbee tricks with him, and having him learn new things. And one of my dogs, I'm teaching to do a handstand, and, just because
simple things.
Yeah. And I taught him and Joe to jump on my back. So they can jump on my back, and they look over my shoulder. It's very cute. I have to be careful though, because I have to have a coat on or it really hurts.
I bet.
So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. But what about for some of the other animals? I'm curious. I was reading.
Okay. Yep.
And I was reading online, I think it was a study or some sort of magazine, and they use this phrase. It was like enrichment equals caring. And I know we talked a lot about food, but I always think about like food equals love. And so, kind of beyond that, enrichment equals caring. And they were talking about the pocket pets, like the rabbits and guinea pigs and so forth. And one of the things they suggested was just trying different types of bedding can be enriching. And different chew things, different types of wood for them to chew on. My rabbits have, I have two really big enclosures, one for the young males and then one with the girls, because the males, when they get older, they get aggressive with each other, but when they're young, they don't. And my girls really don't fight at all. But I have things where they're always getting different types of woods that they like to chew on. I have one of my favorite enrichment things to see with both the horses and the rabbits is I screwed some, what are they called? Those hard brushes, scrub brushes, I guess, and the horses love to scratch on those, and so do the rabbits. And you see them over there rubbing on those, and those are really cool. And my rabbits, I have
this was completely unintentional as an enrichment toy, but I have, my son and I like to sit out with them, in the evening over the summer, and we have a picnic table with the girls, and we'll often have dinner in there, and then we'll sit in this swing and just kind of hang out with them. And the rabbits love the swing, and they jump on that swing.
So
and
cute.
Swing, yeah. And so that has been like this great toy that, I didn't really see as, I didn't put it in there thinking that the rabbits would like it, but, and then just giving them, they love climbing. I'm always seeing my rabbits up high so I have a big, indoor, like shed for them to go in the winter. And I just ended up putting kind of stairs so they can climb up to the top. And I'm always seeing my rabbits up, 12 feet in the air, looking around and just investigating, and just opportunities for them to use their brains, use their bodies, in new ways. One of the fun things I do with my rabbits is I love hostas, and hostas are edible and are not a problem. And so I have my Hosta Gardens in with the rabbits, which sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it's kind of like this year-long battle where I'm trying to have fencing that works, and they're trying to get in, and and some days I win, and some days they win, and I have I have cucumbers out in their areas. I have tomatoes, and I don't tend to eat from my own garden because I'm a pretty limited cook, but I love picking my cucumbers, and I just toss it right in with them. And I have apple trees and pear trees in. So when the apples and pears, fall, they just get to eat them. And,
Nice.
So I kind of am somebody who's like anything and everything, as long as it's, not harmful, as long as the plants are edible, if they get them, you never know what they're going to use.
I was just at a client's house. I need to send Cathy these pictures and videos. I had no idea. I'm treating their dog in the living room, and I glance up, and there's a bunny. And she has free range of their house. She's litter box trained, and she's 13, which they said is very old for a rabbit. And you talk about unintended enrichment activities. Nick had made a cart for their dog when she was having some trouble walking, and he said it was, a huge fail, didn't work for Penzi. But the rabbit, I think her name was Honeybun, claimed that cart as, hers. And so it had like 2 shelves, and she would jump up onto the shelf, and they wheel her around the house on it. And I actually made that statement because I was preparing for our talk, and this was just last week. And I said, wow, what an enriching activity for Honeybun.
Well, and I'm not surprised because my rabbits love the rocking chair. So they have the swing. And so I ended up putting some rocking chairs in, and they just love that movement. They love, so I'm not surprised she likes getting wheeled around.
Which is a bit counterintuitive because we're talking about natural behaviors, Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
She likes what she likes.
Yep. They like what they like. Well, my horses, I mean, you don't really think of horses as picking up and playing with toys, but my horses, if anytime I'm kind of constantly out there working and stuff, and the number of times one of my little minis, Wolf, has grabbed my hammer and run off with it, I can't tell you. He just loves anything that he's kind of not supposed to have.
Ooh, naughty
boy.
Yeah. So
it's funny. He thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
And as they say, when you have a hammer, the world becomes your nail.
That's right.
I like that. I hadn't heard that before.
Yes.
Yeah. So, ladies, as we're sort of wrapping up here, I had one, I think if we could just make that impact statement about what what is the fallout from not having good environmental enrichment? Can we just address that? I mean, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but what's the fallout for not having that for these animals, for our pets?
Well, I don't think that they have the opportunity to live, gosh, this sounds awful, live their best life, you know? Right. I mean, I think that, you know, in order to kind of get all their behavioral needs met, in order to be as joyful as they can be, you know, I think a lot of that has to do with enrichment. And I do think that there are a lot of people who have pets where just kind of their natural day is enriching. I mean, my dad lives on this big kind of place where he's out gardening every single day. And, you know, the dogs live in the woods and go around with the garden. And he doesn't really have to think about enrichment. And yet his dogs have, you know, a very enriched life. But those of us who maybe have more dogs or don't have as, you know, the ability to have their dogs off leash all the time, or, you know, go through the woods and living in that environment, I think it's more important for us to provide those opportunities, even though it might be in a more artificial way, for our animals to have those opportunities to, you know,
and
explore their world. Yeah.
If we think about, explore the world. And if we think about it, maybe as owners, maybe we tend to think maybe a little bit more about their needs as far as like, well, they're indoors and they're getting their food and they're getting, you know, medical attention, but we need to address their emotional and psychological needs as well as their physical needs.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think that this being physically tired is always a good thing,
right?
For people's mental health and for animals' mental health. I think that in the more physical activity that we can give them, the better.
Another thing I read online was mental enrichment is just as, if not more important than physical exercise. And, you know, Cathy and I are dealing with this all the time when we are rehabbing animals that, you know, maybe are recovering from injury or disease and they can't be as physically active. And so how do we get them tired so that maybe we don't have the fallout of, you know, boredom, destructive behaviors, aggression, self-mutilation, you know, things like that, when they can't be as physically active. And so providing that environmental enrichment is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, if folks out there are still a little bit confused, about, you know, what enrichment may be, I actually saw something that was making an analogy to like kids in the classroom and doing enriching activities, you know, in like after school programs. So, you know, kind of making this parallel, you know, yes, we need to, you know, learn math and English and these kinds of things in school, but we know that school provides, and it certainly came out during the pandemic, so much more than that, right? So again, the social interaction and so forth, but they were saying like after school programs that include things like yoga, cooking, sports, science experiments, board games, art, you know, all of those things that, you know, we're struggling to fund because, you know, some of the powers that be don't think that they're that important. But that would be, I think, a great analogy between what our pets need and what our children and our society needs, and falls right into that whole mental enrichment stimulation thing.
Yeah. I mean, I used to always think about enrichment was why we want to be alive. You know, those are the things that we want to do, that we want to have fun.
Not the things we need to be alive, but why do we want to be alive? Yeah. What brings us joy? Yeah,
exactly.
That's a good summary. Can you tell us, Amanda, where our listeners might be able to find you, or do you want them to? In terms of if they had any questions about enrichment or wanted to look up some information?
Well, I have a website, datadrivenagility.com, and certainly, and that has my email on it, which is just amandashyne@gmail.com if anybody has any questions. I have some research articles that they could probably find pretty easily on the web as well.
Yes, I did. I found a plethora of information, from your research days. And I know you briefly mentioned that, when you were teaching, when you were a professor, and you were in, I think, the psychology department at Bridgewater State.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have a ton of stuff out there. Really cool.
Well, thank you, Amanda. I learned a lot. I'm exhausted.
You guys. Thank you guys for having me.
Yes, thank you for taking time out of your day. And please give all of the critters at home a gentle pat and some enriching activities for me.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Amanda.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show. Follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at Petability Podcast.
For more information about Cathy's books and living with blind dogs, please go to enableyourpet.com. Thank you, and please tune in next time.